KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Welcome to the Central Valley Ledger, formerly San Joaquin Spotlight. We're here on the beautiful campus of California State University, Fresno, in Studio A. Our guests this week are from Fresno, Dayana, Jiselle, and Ayers. Both of you, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So before we start talking about the organization that you two are representing, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start with you, Dayana.
So I'm actually pretty new to the Team Fresno staff. I am their program and volunteer coordinator. So my goal here is to come in and help Lee a little. I know he has a lot on his plate with a lot of the events that we have going on, and also just kind of get more of the volunteer world involved with our events.
Lee, tell us about yourself.
Well, with Fresno, I began serving on the board of directors 5 years ago, and then one thing led to another, and I became active in the day-to-day leadership. And it's a fantastic organization to be part of, and as we're going to talk about in the program, we have a lot going on that's high impact and very helpful to the community.
Well, and with the drought and all of the other stuff going on, I imagine that you two and your organization is busy. How do you get volunteers? I mean, what's the secret? Because, you know, there's a lot of organizations out there that need volunteers to survive.
Yeah. Well, I've actually been surprised to find out that there's not much that I need to do. People are actually willing to volunteer, and people are interested in what we're doing, whether it's a lot of the horticulture students here at Fresno State or just community members that, you know, want to know or already are involved in what's happening here in the Valley. So it hasn't been too hard. What's been a little bit troubling for me is, you know, getting those people involved that don't have that knowledge and experience, because I want to get those involved as well.
Well, I got to say, Fresno State students are incredible, and I'm biased because
I agree.
here we are in Studio A, and the people behind the cameras and in the production room are all students. So I agree with you. Students are great. Lee, tell us a little bit about what you did before you joined Fresno, because years ago, you and I connected. Right. We worked together on some financial education stuff going on.
Right. Yeah, that was a chapter where I was serving Stewards Inc., a program that helps people with disabilities manage their income. And you were, I think, helping at United Way with that same topic and helping people file their tax returns. Along the way, I've done several different community service assignments. I've also been in real estate investments. And in an earlier chapter, I served as a city manager.
So you've got a very diverse background.
I do, and sometimes in life you do things and you wonder why, and then 10 years later, 15 years later, you draw on that. And often it's the geography. You know, we will find ourselves in a community like Reedley or Orange Cove. I may have gone out there for a completely different reason before, but now it's coming in handy.
How has your experience and training helped you in this current role you're in now?
Well, a lot of what we do is strategic, setting a strategic direction, and that's been part of the work I've done through the years. And then program management, and that's why we brought Dayana on board to help us with that program coordination, because we're now finding that perhaps with the drought, perhaps with the maturing of our community, we have traction with just about every one of our priorities.
And we're going to talk about the priorities, so keep that in mind. Okay. But before we go there, I want to ask Dayana, what's your background in? Tell us a little bit about what you did before you came to Fresno.
Well, I just actually graduated from the MCJ department here at Fresno State.
Another Fresno State graduate.
So I lived my last Fresno State years in the studio. And I've been involved in the media. I'm an on-air personality for iHeartMedia. So that's a lot of, you know, networking, marketing that I was already doing. After I graduated Fresno State this past fall, I just really asked myself, do I want to leave Fresno was my first question. First, my answer was yes, and then as I thought about it, my answer was no. And I wanted to see how I can stay in Fresno and really help my community. I'm born and raised here in Fresno. So, you know, I ran into the position at Tree Fresno, and I have to say everything I was looking to do and to serve back to my community, Tree Fresno is offering exactly that.
Well, we're glad you stayed.
Thank
because
you.
oftentimes people leave, and some of them come back and some of them don't. And we're glad that you found something here, and good luck to you in your role.
Thank you.
Lee, priorities. What are the 5 priorities that Tree Fresno is doing?
Well, first is education. People are always interested, what do I plant now? Like I got a call today from a lady who's removing redwood trees. They've reached the end of their useful life. They're showing stress from the heat. What do we plant to replace it? And then of course there's where do you plant the tree? There's a lot of things to consider, whether it be power lines or whether it be utility lines underneath or the distance from your neighbor. So that's part of the education process.
So I want to stop you there
Okay.
and ask you on that note. So I could totally plant the wrong tree in the
Right.
wrong place.
Oh, yeah.
What would happen?
Right. You know, I learned right away that trees can be a headache as well as a joy. And if you plant it wisely, you select the species wisely and put it in the correct place, it's wonderful. I know we were in Tarpey Village one year when I was first starting with Tree Fresno, and we ran into people that didn't want to have a tree because they had had a problem with their sewer line. Or maybe it had uprooted a sidewalk. Or maybe a neighbor's tree had imposed on them. Whereas if a tree is planted properly, it can conserve energy, it can be air quality benefits, and add beauty to the landscape.
Are you finding, Dayana, that people, I shouldn't say all people, but some people are doing this? They're planting trees in the wrong spot?
I'm blown away by all the precautions that need to take place before planting. You know, I never knew that it all went into it. So yes, I am definitely very appalled and impressed, actually, that it takes so many planning beforehand. A lot of the phone calls that I get are exactly what he just explained. You know, people are freaking out because their trees are doing something they shouldn't be doing. So even getting those phone calls kind of, I think, awares me. You know, people need to know, and they need to be educated.
So we talked about education. What other priorities? And this is not just for Lee. I know I looked at you and I pointed at you,
Right.
but I mean, both of you can
Right.
chime in.
Well, she's a 3-week veteran, so she's
Yeah.
doing pretty well. Well, as you go through the list, the next one is what we call vibrant neighborhoods. We know that trees can add value wherever you plant them if it's done correctly, whether it be an older neighborhood or whether it be a rural community. Trees can transform a neighborhood that might have gotten older and tireder. And we're working on a project in Reedley where we're looking at a community landscape plan for a whole community as a way to revitalize the community and strengthen its economy.
Before we talk about the next priority, let's say I call you and I want to volunteer for Tree Fresno. What are some questions you're going to ask me, and what ultimately could I be doing?
Well, with Tree Fresno, you know, mainly would be there's a lot of planting volunteer that can be done. So if you want to get down and dirty, definitely do some planting. But we're also open to getting people that just want to help with the awareness and get the voice out there. So maybe if it's leadership teams that, you know, want to help us, I'm always open, and I have a few booths planned out throughout next month. So to go to fairs and booths in schools and start educating the kids. So really it's a lot of different things that volunteers can do. We have a calendar that's just full of events. You know, my first day on the job, Lee and I went over the calendar, and it's just, we have like 2 days off
Welcome
in the
to
month of May, right?
I could just picture it. Welcome to the family. Oh, by
Right,
the way, here's your
Right.
calendar.
So there's
Right.
work to be done, definitely.
I would add to that, I think that as people listening might reflect on it, community outreach, engaging people, telling the story. Some people enjoy, you know,
Yeah.
interaction. We're recently at Clovis Community College. Dayana's going to be at the zoo tomorrow. We're going to be at a meeting with third graders over at Central Unified School District 2 weeks after that. So there's engagement, outreach. So, and then there are people who would rather not get into the talking, but want to actually dig holes and plant trees. And there's a place for them too.
Yeah.
Speaking of planting trees, I read somewhere that Tree Fresno has planted 40,000 trees.
Over 40.
Over 40. Where are these trees? I mean, I could be driving to work, passing by one of these trees and not know it.
When I first joined, Lee talked to me about what he called plant blindness, right? And was it a book you were reading?
Right.
Or?
The Nature Principle by Richard Louv.
It's a study that people they're blind to plants and to trees. So when you walk into our office, you see the number of trees we planted, and I asked myself the exact same question. But now I find myself driving, down to the store, and all these trees are just popping up at me. You'd be surprised when you really open your eyes and you start to see the environment. They're there. They're definitely there.
Let me run with that and then take you to a decision on our strategic plan.
Sure.
We serve 4 counties, 1.75 million people. If you spread 40,000 trees over 4 counties, you might not notice them unless you happen to have one planted near you.
But it's an impressive number. I mean, 40.
Absolutely.
So if Tree Fresno wasn't, this is the way I look at it, if Tree Fresno wasn't around, there would be 40,000 trees less out there today.
And we think it's safe to say that we've inspired tree planting as we've planted trees. And often it started with a school site or a landscape trail or a park. And that brought trees appropriate to the place, brought the benefits of the trees, brought the community together, and hopefully that led to some tree planting nearby.
How do you select where to plant these trees? I mean, I know that you look around and you make sure, we talked about it earlier, but when we're talking 40,000, there are some places that have to have hundreds of trees that you've planted. So do you work with developers, or are you working with, parks departments?
Well, most of them have been on public properties. Often the grant source dictates that we put it on a public property, or sometimes we have a donation wanting to have trees put on a median island or at a school. Beyond that, it really depends on the owner-operator of the school district. For example, we just got a grant to plant trees at 10 different sites with the Fresno Unified School District. Well, these are established schools, so we had to engage the facilities department and their associate superintendent for facilities to talk about what species and where and how that would complement the instructional program, as well as hopefully provide some energy benefit.
So, you're new to Tree Fresno. Are there times where you look at a tree and you're like, oh, we learned about this. This is the so-and-so species?
Not yet, not yet. I think right now what's really starting to happen inside of me is I think I'm starting to see, I'm bringing more of the emotional and spiritual sense to these trees that we're planting. I'm really starting to see the benefit that they give in that sense. We worked on Radio Park, which is actually the neighborhood that I was born and raised in. So being in that park, and visualizing, this is where, I played soccer with my dad, and we're planting all these beautiful trees that are providing shade and protection and safety for the neighborhood kids. I think that's the emotions that I'm bringing into this.
And on that note, you were just talking to Larry Balakian about the upcoming exhibit at the Fresno Art Museum. That's right next door to Radio Park. And we're in the process of planting 18 trees there, and we'll be planting 2 on Earth Day. And I think with that improvement and some of the other things they're doing, it's really going to add value for the art museum.
I'm going to play instigator a little bit here.
Okay.
And say, someone once told me, if a tree does not bear fruit, then it's no good. So either of you, I mean, that's kind of a softball I'm throwing your way, but either of you answer that question. What good is a tree that doesn't bear fruit?
I actually read a quote just the other day. I meant to send it to you, and it said, a life with no meaning is like a tree with no fruit. And I meant to send it to Lee to get your opinion, so I'd be interested.
Right. Well, we are in an agriculture region. We are in a place that produces food. And at the same time, it's safe to say that a lot of people do not want fruit trees in their yard. It has something to do with the maintenance and some of the pests that it attracts. And so for an ornamental tree, and that's the category that the plant science people would use, being fruitless is better. In fact, for example, the olive trees that we recommend are intentionally fruitless so that it won't be a problem for the sidewalks and the streets. So although we will often recommend citrus trees like the Washington navel orange. If people want something for shade and they want something for air quality benefits, going with the fruitless tree would be a better choice.
Before I take down a tree, what advice would you two give me? Because sometimes we have trees that are so overgrown or they're breaking the sidewalk that some people go out and chop the tree up. So before we do that, any advice?
Well, if it's in the public right-of-way, call the city, because that is under the control of them. I think you would want to look at the remaining useful life. We advocate retaining existing trees. It's when the tree is mature that it's serving the air quality benefits, absorbing the carbon, providing the shade. But if the day comes that it's a hazard, then we would recommend that if it's a large tree, that you retain a competent contractor, because taking down a large tree can be dangerous.
So we kind of went on we were talking about priorities,
right,
and then I took you on a tangent. Now
right,
I'm bringing you back.
Okay.
We talked about 2 priorities.
Right.
Talk about the next one.
Well, and these are in no particular order, although I think education is a good place to start. We have another one called Parks and Trails. Tree Fresno has a Parks Challenge. The Trust for Public Lands, comparing cities throughout the country, found that we have fewer parks than the other large cities in the nation. And as a result, they are working with us to initiate a study of how we could add to the parklands. But we also want to promote the better care of those parks. And that, of course, includes tree planting and also trees along trails. Sugar Pine Trail is probably one of the better known ones, Old Town Clovis Trail, and now we're working on trees along the Fancher Creek Trail.
Where do these trees come from? I mean, do you, because 40,000 trees is a lot, and I know it's over time, but where did these trees come from?
Well, seeds. Most trees that we purchase are, well, let's restate this. When we plant a tree in a public place, it needs to be well enough along that it's got a root system that can help it get established right away. If you were planting a tree in your yard, you could go with a smaller tree because you could give it TLC and protection. But in a public place, it needs to be larger. And we'll go to a tree grower or a tree nursery.
So I envision that your office has tons of baby trees laying around. Am I incorrect in my
right
assessment?
on point.
Yeah, it depends on the event and the time of year. Right now, we do have several seedlings that we purchased for a community engagement project in Reedley. And they're right now like this, and they're going to be 15 feet in a couple years.
Yeah.
That's incredible. There's some interesting things you're doing. Talk about the drought. You know, it's out there. It's in the media. We see in the mountain areas where this is really impacting us. Tell us how it's impacting your organization, and is it serious? Should we worry about it?
Well, I think what Tree Fresno, what I've seen they're doing a really good job at is educating people that are either already caring for trees or wanting to plant trees on, what do we call them, drought? Water-wise trees. And I mean, that coming in, that's something I didn't even know was an option. So Tree Fresno actually deals with trees that would make sense to plant during a drought.
The good thing about the drought, Sevag, was it got people's attention. They started thinking more deeply, what should I plant? It's some trees that are really nice and ornamental need a lot of water and really aren't the best choice for this location. Sometimes people move here from Oregon, from Washington, from New England, and they remember a tree they love there. Not always the best choice here. But with the drought, we're also mindful of what's happening in the mountains. And as we were talking before the program, millions of trees have died up there. And we have a big challenge ahead of us.
And do you accept donation of trees? Let's talk about how people can help other than volunteering. I mean, if I say I support you and I want to donate 100 trees, do you tell me what kind of trees you need, or how does that work?
As a practical matter, because we place trees in public places, we are really limited to what professional growers and nurseries can use. So if somebody wants to help us plant a tree, the best thing to do is make a donation. We can purchase a tree in a 15-gallon container that might be 8 to 10 feet tall for anywhere from $40 to $70, depending on the species and how much in demand it is. And so if somebody writes a check for $50, $100, that gets a tree in the ground.
We talked about 3 priorities, and I know you have 5.
Right.
What's the 4th one?
Well, another one is planting trees to honor veterans and loved ones. We call those tribute trees. And we're starting a new program with tribute trees. Each year at Earth Day, we are going to plant 1 or more trees to honor leaders in the environment. And this year we're honoring Dr. David Lighthall, who was a lead researcher with respiratory impacts of air quality and a big advocate for exercise and trees. And so that would be an example of a tribute tree. Dayana, first or second day on the job?
First day on the job was a tribute tree. Yeah,
very
so it
nice.
was very impactful. We got to plant a tree down on Eaton Trail. And, you know, I got to watch the family. And I think that's when I first saw the impact that this could have had. The family, a lot of mixed emotions from, you know, laughter when they're remembering their loved ones to a little emotion at the end. But I thought about it. I mean, what a beautiful way to honor someone. You now have this tree that you can care for throughout the years, your children's children's. I mean, trees live more than we do, you know, the generation to generation. And it's a place where you can go in honor of your loved one. So that's a program I'm really excited at.
You know, Sevag, it's fun to bring new life when you're honoring someone that may have passed on, or someone who's near and dear to you who's still alive and able to see it. And we highly recommend planting trees to honor people who are alive to see it. But in any event, we're adding new life to the place we plant. And we do that in collaboration with the city where the tree planting is taking place, because they're going to have the long-term responsibility for the care of the tree, but we're going to have a lot of folks caring for it and appreciating it as it grows taller.
Yeah.
How do we know how much water a tree needs? I mean, I see people sometimes watering in the daytime when it's hot, and some people say, oh, you're killing the tree by doing that. And then I see someone watering in the evening, and then I see someone watering in the morning. So when is a good time to water a tree?
Anytime. Our rule of thumb is give a tree a 5-gallon drink once a week. But if it's a large tree, it might need more, particularly if it's hot. And there's some new guidelines that we just received from CAL FIRE, which they actually recommend a good soaking only once a month and let the tree fully absorb it, dry out. That way you have less exposure to root fungus. You really don't want to have a tree's feet wet all the time. You want to let it dry out. But the short answer is it depends on the tree. But in California, the state urban forester, John Melvin, states that most people overwater their trees.
Lee, you know, you have had a very interesting background, and I say that because we've known each other for a while. Right. Why Tree Fresno? I mean, you could have done a bunch of things in another organization or other organizations, given your background, but you've parked in Tree Fresno. Why?
Well, it's kind of like going to church. It's because you're asked. John Valentino is one of the co-founders of Tree Fresno, and he approached me about 6 years ago about serving on the board. And I've worked with John on some community projects, have a deep respect for the man. And after we talked it over and saw the opportunity to reshape the strategic direction of the organization, I joined them. But as a practical matter, as a person, Shelley and I chose to become donors and volunteers for Tree Fresno over 20 years ago because it's an organization that actually does things.
Yeah.
It isn't just talk. We actually go out and do things that change a community.
We are running out of time this week on the program. Right. I could sit here for another hour easily, easily. But the 5th priority, briefly, talk about that.
I'm trying to remember. Our 5th priority is that trees can benefit resource conservation. They can save energy, they can save water, they can save soil. And what we do is do projects that demonstrate the benefits of trees. And let me tell you about a big one. We are going to be planting trees next to Highway 99 as a well-researched program to demonstrate the benefits of trees to mitigate near-road pollution. The scientists are going to measure how much particles are deflected or absorbed so that they don't impact the property owners nearby.
You two are doing some wonderful things over in Fresno. You just started, and it sounds like you're off running already. How can people find out more about this organization, volunteer, or donate?
Right. Well, we're actually working on a whole revamp of the website. That's kind of my first project's coming on. So I'd really just gear everyone towards our Facebook page, Tree Fresno, where I post all of our upcoming events and any events we have out in the community. So I'd go to our Facebook and give us a like.
Excellent. Lee, Dana, thank you so much for coming on the program this week. That's all for this edition of the Central Valley Ledger, formerly San Joaquin Spotlight. Our guests this week have been here talking about Tree Fresno. Thank you to the crew behind the cameras and in the studio who are Fresno State students here in Studio A of the Mass Communication and Journalism Department. Thank you to those watching this broadcast on Comcast 93 and AT&T 99. Also to those listening to this broadcast on 90.7 FM KFSR Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For a complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.